all told, between opposition leader and spokesman, they made promises upon promises upon promises. But did they give the Jamaican people any idea of how much those promises would cost? And whether or not that they would have to cut back on something to do what they're promising? No. They said they are united with fresh ideas and solid plans, ready. But let's see if indeed that would be the case.
And on that very interesting note, what promises to be very exciting, as it was for those who watched, let me pause here to say a special welcome to everyone to Jamaica 411. I want to thank you all for joining me today. My name is Michelle Stern and I'm your host. Let me say a special shout out to my subscribers. Welcome back. Always lovely to have you. And I would like to say thank you for your continued support. You are a tower of strength. I also want to say to you that I do enjoy reading your comments. So please keep the comments going. If you're here with me for the first time, welcome. I hope that after watching this video, you would have found the truth you came to find. If you have not yet done so, please go ahead and subscribe to our channel because, as old-time people would say, encouragement sweetens labor. Not true? Yes. I would also like to ask you all a big favor. Please share this video as far and as wide as you can. And for your kindness, I thank you all in advance. Well, now that you're back with me, let's get down to business. All right, so we're listening to Sister Fayval. Some call her Auntie Fayval. Same person, Auntie Fayval. Yes, or Sister Fayval. And she did something that we couldn't do. She came to the Parliament quoting from the budget speech that Julian and the Englishman made, and using her information from the various departments, the tax revenue department, among others, I'm sure, she sought to put some figures to what it is the Englishman said that they would do were you stupid enough to take him and put him in Jamaica House. And she came up with some costings, and we're going to go through it. As it happens, the Englishman press conference was done just before I'm doing this video now, so I'll be able to do a comparison for you. Hopefully it will not be very long. I may only take a few if it starts to get too long, and then come back with another video. What do you say to that? Sounds good? Yes? Great. All right, so I'm going to let you listen further to what she had to say. And what she has to say may occasion me butting in from time to time. I hope you don't mind. Yes. All right, so let's continue to listen.
Madam Speaker, allow me, Madam Speaker, to demonstrate to the people of Jamaica that the promises from the opposition would create FinSAC 2.0. You see, Madam Speaker, the opposition put forward a lot of words with few figures. But within all those pages and pages and pages of words is a budget, an implied budget, Madam Speaker. And it is that implied budget that I would like all Jamaicans to understand, because it has serious negative ramifications for our future. So, Madam Speaker, let's begin. I will lay out side by side the central government's budget for fiscal year 2025-26 and the opposition's implied budget for that fiscal year as well. These are the headings, starting with chart number 1. Yes.
Fictitious.
Madam Speaker, I rise. Madam Speaker, I rise on a point of order because the minister is misleading the House. We did not present an implied budget for the coming fiscal year. We presented our proposals, our policy commitments for the next PNP government. And we have never said that they will be implemented in the current fiscal year. They are... As has been said, the budget... After today, the budget would have been passed for the fiscal year. Our proposals represent what we will be doing for the duration of our first term in office. And that is what we were saying. And they will all operate within the current fiscal rules. Stop misleading the House.
We are misleading. Dismissing. That is no point of order. Turn on our mic. A point of disorder. Julia.
What an admission! My God. So you heard right at the end a female voice saying, "What an admission!" And you clearly heard Delroy Chuck said, "My God." Well, I have to agree. Yes, my God. Now, what was it that Fayval Williams was saying? She was not saying that they were presenting a budget for this term. What she was saying, basically, in my view, is that if you were to compare what it is that they said that they will do to what it is that we say we are doing, and had they been the government to put in place what it is that they said they were going to do, this is what it would cost, and we are going to compare it to what it is that we have budgeted for. That's what she said. He totally misunderstood what it was that she was saying when she said it was an implied budget. Implied meaning, had they been government and made the same proposals, that is what she's talking about. She's going to now compare their proposal to the opposition's proposal. Anything hard in that to understand? He misread. And in his misreading, him jumped to his feet on a point of order, which Desmond McKenzie says, no point of order, turn on back the minister's mic, and delivered of himself an amazing piece of admission. The budget debate, which is an exercise that is supposed to tell the country what it is the government plan to do in that fiscal year with the taxes that them collect. That is the main purpose of the budget. The budget is supposed to tell the people how much taxes will be collected, how much revenue the government anticipates it will get, what it costs the government to run its operations, and what programs the government plan for that year. That is my understanding of what the budget is. The opposition's role is to look at the budget that the government is proposing and point out to the country, first of all, whether it is an achievable budget, yes or no, because we need to know. Remember, we put them there to represent us. And if government will come with something, especially in an election year, it is critical that we know whether or not what they're proposing is pie in the sky, and we need our opposition to tell us. Fayval went on to say later on that they never did any such thing. They never critiqued one thing in her budget. They never said one thing was not credible or achievable. Therefore, we must suppose that in their view, that what it is the government coming with is indeed credible and achievable. So their purpose in the parliament would have been fulfilled and their role, even as much as they never said so, but by not saying so, it means they see nothing in the budget to fault. You following? Yes. So they have nothing to fault the government for in terms of their proposed expenditures, in terms of the tax revenue and the capital budget and how that is supposed to be spent. They have no issue with that at all, meaning that if they were the government, they would have done the same thing. So having nothing to critique the budget on, what the Englishman is telling us, that they crafted a speech not to look into the government and what they're proposing and critique it, because it's an election year in another 6 months or less. We'll be having an election. They decided to go into the House and not spend the time telling us about the government's budget. Instead, to tell us about, because no matter how the budget look perfect, there must be something in it they could talk about. They have been doing it for years. So therefore, they decide to take the time and deliver of themselves a manifesto. What it is, let me tell you what he said. We presented our proposals, our policy commitments for the next PNP government. Isn't that what is found in a manifesto? So what exactly were we looking at in Mark Golding's budget presentation? It was not a budget presentation. He went into the House of Parliament with a political campaign. Him take in political campaign into the Parliament. And him went talk about Andrew Holness talk for 5 hours, and that was not appropriate. You know, say there's a man, something wrong with him. From when me I tell you, say the man no right in him head. The man is sick. The man gone in with Parliament. The Constitution does not recognize political party. You will never see the name PNP and you'll never see JLP in there. It speaks about the senators and the members of Parliament and how they should be selected and when the election cycle run. And him take up himself, gone in with Parliament, don't present a budget, but instead admitted on the Parliament floor that him carry his political campaign for the next general election in our Parliament. They need to go look and see if there's a rule about how you conduct these matters in the House and sanction him for it. He cannot be allowed to get away with it. This man from day one has no respect for the people of this country, nor the Constitution. Hell, him don't even have any respect for the People's National Party's Constitution, and him a look for turn Prime Minister. For do what? The behavior of this man is symptomatic of who he really is. He is the descendant and beneficiary, his old money that he inherited from his slave-owning great-grandparents. Benjamin Nunes and Esther Nunes, both of them buried in the Jewish cemetery in Montego Bay. Right? And so he feels a sense of privilege. He was the one who came here and made us into slaves, and therefore him feel him can do any damn thing that him feel like it. This man is a sick, sick man, an unimportant imbecile, and he thinks that he's it, and therefore him can come into a parliament and run him election campaign if that is what he feels like doing. And these little black slaves that are in the parliament, him don't expect them to be able to do anything because them is a bunch of cowards. That's what he thinks. This imbecile needs to be disciplined. He need to be disciplined, Master Andrew. Discipline him. Make him understand. So daddy sharp in our parliament.
Madam Speaker, this is a budget debate. And anything you put forward has fiscal implications. So, Madam Speaker, because I was interrupted, let me start again. Madam Speaker, allow me to demonstrate to the people of Jamaica that the promises from the opposition will create FinSAC 2.0. You see, Madam Speaker, the opposition put forward a lot of words with few figures, but within all those pages and pages and pages of words is a budget, an implied budget. Madam Speaker, they did not put forward, Madam Speaker, they did not put forward an explicit budget, but they put forward ideas, and those ideas can be costed, and they should have been costed and made into a budget. So, Madam Speaker, let us begin. Again, I will lay out side by side with the central government's budget for fiscal year 2025-26 and the opposition's implied budget for the fiscal year 2025-26 as well. So, Madam Speaker, as I indicated last week, the tax revenue that the central government is projecting, Madam Speaker, I do need some protection from the noisy gallery over there. Madam Speaker, as I indicated last week, the tax revenue that the central government is projecting for fiscal year 25-26 is 949,494,000,000. This is represented on the screen, chart number 2. The opposition did not have any objection to that figure. They didn't put forward any opinion as to whether or not that revenue figure is too high or too low. So I'm taking that as an implied acceptance. And so I will give them on their side of the ledger 949,494,000,000 in their column as well.
In other words, what Sister Fayval is saying is that had there been anything said that they found objectionable, they would have raised it in the debate. They had time to do it. They raised no point. And since they raised no point, she's of the view that had they been the government, had they been sitting where she's sitting with the same revenue stream, the same bauxite levy revenue and so on, that is what they recognize they would have gotten as well. Therefore, they had nothing to critique the budget about. In other words, the government was not doing or saying anything that was out of the way in this election year. So they did not deal with that at all. That's basically what she's saying. So she's going to assume that had they been the government, this is what they would have spent to the $900 and something million in revenue.
Our tax revenues represent a 5.9% increase over what we collected for fiscal year 2024-25. That is coming to a close. That's a little bit above inflation. No wild assumptions. Plus, Madam Speaker, we already subtracted all the give-ups in that figure. It's not to come. We took it out of the revenue projections already. And that cost was $9.2 billion. That's the cost of the good news that we presented, yes. So, Madam Speaker, I'm going to add that back to the opposition's column because, to be fair, those were our give-ups, not theirs, right? So we're going to put it back there. Right. Those are right. So we put it back. We put it back on their side of the ledger.
Sister Fayval didn't say the total figure, but we'll work it out. So when you add the $949 billion that the government has now to the $9.176 billion that she's giving back to the taxpayers, when you add them up, it comes up to $949.5 billion. And that is what the opposition would have had available to them were they the government.
So in the next chart, we move on to the next line item in the budget, non-tax revenues. These non-tax revenues, Madam Speaker, they include the $11.4 billion from NHT. They include asset sales, any share sales, for example, Trans-Jamaica. This is also where we put distributions from public bodies. And this would be where we have securitizations.
They don't like that, so they can't get it.
No, Madam Speaker, do you remember how the opposition leader declared that he would stop extracting the 11.4 from NHT and that securitization is us taking revenues from the future to spend in the present and something about, and you know, yes. Well, Madam Speaker, we cannot put any revenues from that in their column. Right, nothing. We would offend them if we did. So nothing there, Madam Speaker. So we move on to the next, item, the bauxite levy. Madam Speaker, we are projecting to receive $812 million in bauxite levy. And we will put that same amount, bauxite levy, on their side of the ledger as well. In an article entitled, "The Bauxite Levy 40 Years On, Who Let the Puss Out of the Bag?" The author quoted Dr. Davis and economist Dennis Morrison as saying that Jamaica has little to show from the bauxite levy and that the country suffered through ill-fated projects and misspending of the bauxite levy funds, which were lodged to the Capital Development Fund. The upshot of all of this, Madam Speaker, is that bauxite companies began increasing their investments, not in Jamaica, in other bauxite-producing countries, and Jamaica consequently lost its position near the top of the ratings as a world-leading producer. Another failed policy of the opposition. And as the bauxite left Jamaica, so did high-paying jobs. The opposition spokesman has some nerve, Madam Speaker, talking about low-paying jobs now. It's your government failed policy that sent the high-paying jobs in the bauxite industry packing. But, Madam Speaker, I digressed.
Now I know some persons may be saying, Michelle, will you leave out that for man? That is very interesting. You should bring it to the public attention. I agree, but because, the what we have to bring is very long. I decided to leave that out perhaps for another video on another topic where it will be more appropriate. And part of the reason why I left it out because it's a history, but Edward Seaga did not remove the bauxite levy either. You follow? So we'll get back to that at another time. But we want to stay with what it is that Fayval had to say, because this is what we're dealing with now. All right? So we'll look into that later.
But, Madam Speaker, I digressed. Let me get back to the implied budget of the opposition. All right, so the next line item is capital revenue. We are phasing out this line, so there's no money there because it's incorporated elsewhere in the budget. So we move on to the next line, which is grants. We're projecting to receive $5.9 billion, call it $6 billion in grants. We will put that on the ledger of the opposition as well. So those are the revenue items, Madam Speaker. On our side, we expect to see revenue and grants of $1 trillion, 96 billion, and 83 million. On the opposition side of the ledger, they have an implied budget of implied revenue of 965 billion, 443 million, because they don't want any securitization or NHD contribution or other non-recurring revenues. They especially don't like securitization. And they figure, Madam Speaker, if they speak badly against securitization over and over and over and over again, Jamaicans will begin to think it's a bad thing because, after all, the leader of the opposition was a partner in a very big financial sector company, and so he must know a thing or two about securitization. And if he says he doesn't like securitization, then, Jamaicans probably would conclude that something is wrong with securitization. But I want to say to Jamaicans, there is nothing wrong with securitization. The global securitized market is massive, nearly US 13 trillion. Research shows that 73% of residential mortgage debt is funded by securitization. 16% of auto loans are funded by securitization. 27% of commercial real estate debt is funded by securitization. 7% of credit card debt is funded by securitization. 8% of student loans are funded by securitization. 40% of multifamily debt is funded by securitization. 1 trillion of corporate borrowing is funded by securitization. The securitization market, while having roots in the late 18th century, with debt securitization, was modernized with the structured financing of mortgage pools in the 1970s and has grown significantly since then. So, Madam Speaker, I believe the opposition leader can stop now trying to drum all the negatives into the heads of Jamaicans about securitization. Madam Speaker, we now move to the costing of the give-ups, the promises the opposition announced. So, Madam Speaker, the spokesman on finance said that they would pay back the asset tax that is levied on the financial sector in 5 payments. So first, Madam Speaker, the spokesman on finance will have to stop taking the asset tax before he can start paying back for what was taken. Otherwise, he would never finish paying back.
Members.
A point of order. The member for South East St. Andrew said nothing about giving back asset tax. He talked about phasing out the tax over 5 years, not giving back the revenue already collected in 1 year. The minister is again misleading the House, and she must stop doing it. On securitization, I never said that securitization is in itself wrong. I said the use of the proceeds to fund the recurrent budget, using future revenue to meet today's expenses is what is wrong. And she's again misrepresenting the position.
So, Leader of the Opposition, members, please, Leader of the Opposition, I hope you'll appreciate that this is not a cross debate. And members, I'm ruling, and the ruling stands.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. So, Madam Speaker, an estimate for the asset tax give-up would be $8,364,000,000, which we will minus of the revenues of the opposition side of the ledger. Additionally, the opposition said they would not require any corporate taxes from MSMEs for 3 years. Madam Speaker, that's a give-up of $11.4 billion. Not for 3 years, in the first year, Madam Speaker. So we take that off of their ledger as well. The opposition also said they would take 1% of the taxes on the food import bill to put into a fund, so that would not be available for the central government's budget. And their own estimate is $2.5 billion. So we have to minus that off on their side of the ledger. And I have no quarrel with that figure. The opposition also said that they would increase the employer tax credit from 30% to 40% of tax chargeable. The cost. So the cost of that, Madam Speaker, would be a give up of $3.4 billion. So now if we take a tally, their revenues and grants would now be $939,859,000,000 after all those give-ups.
All right, so we're going to have to make some adjustments to these figures because the Englishman and Julian had a conference today, press conference, and they made some clarities. When it comes to Julian, he never said that he would remove the asset tax all at once. He said it would be phased out. He never said how, and of course they can make that decision. Today at the press conference, he said in the first year, they will be reducing the asset tax by $2.5 billion. Now, the asset tax that is being paid by the financial institutions, banks, insurance companies, and so on, is actually $8.3 billion. So if you were to divide that in 5, they said they are going to take out $2.5 billion in the first year, and therefore we need to add back the $5.8 billion that Sister Fayval took out. Then the matter of the MSME, Julian evidently said that the 3-year tax holiday would have been only for the new businesses that set up. So it's the new MSMEs that will benefit from this tax and not all the MSMEs. So they are not saying that they're going to be giving them tax holidays, which may account for this $11.3 billion that Sister Fayval said she's deducting. It's not. So we're going to have to add back that $10.3 billion, and then we'll see what we get. And what we get is $956 billion. That is the figure, 956.076. So we need to add back $16,217,000,000 to the final figure that Fayval had here, which is 939,859,000,000. So that would be the revenue now that the Englishman would have available to him after his give back. But what exactly is the amount of the give back? For that, we're going to do a little mathematics. We're going to take away the $956.076 billion from the total revenues and grants of $965,443,000, and what we get is that their tax give back is $9,367,000,000. That's $9.4 billion. And that is the giveaway at this stage. And remember, at this stage, what we're talking about is only the revenue. We're going to come now to the expense side, because we have the school feeding program and we also have the first child in the household to get a university degree scholarship program. Now at this stage, what we're going to do is we're going to take a break from Fayval and go to the Englishman's press conference that they held today and let them tell us how much their giveaways will be and where the money is going to come from. You're going to hear the Englishman refer to something he called discretionary fund. That discretionary fund is what is in the budget under the title Recurrent Programs. And that now is where it's going to get very interesting and very exciting. So please don't go anywhere.
So, in the just concluded budget debate, the opposition, People's National Party, through our spokesperson for finance, Julian Robinson, and myself, put forward our vision for the first term of office of the next PNP government. We took the opportunity to lay out some of our proposals as to how to make Jamaica a better place for all, to encourage economic growth, moving from the stagnation, which has been a feature of this government's management of the economy, moving to higher levels of growth that can create more wealth for our people, can create more fiscal space for social investments and for infrastructure investments and so on.
So you heard all of that. Now, we're not going to do any analysis in this video. We'll do the analysis in another video. But for now, you heard what he said, that the proposals that they were making, what effect it will have on the people and the economy. In my next video, we'll analyze it to see if it will have the effect that he says it will.
In the closing of the budget debate, the Minister of Finance attempted some political gimmickry to portray the proposals that we've made as being somehow not lacking credibility or being irresponsible and so on. Nothing could be further from the truth. We have gone through our proposals with care and attention and diligence. We've used the available data from the sources that are publicly known, the budget books, and the fiscal policy paper and other instruments that have been tabled with the budget and other available information to analyze the costing of our proposals and how we would be able to pay for them. The ministers tried to make out that what we were proposing in our presentations was an implied budget. That is not what we were doing, and we never said that we were doing that. We were putting forward our policy commitments for the first term, and the term of office is up to 5 years while we are in government. Clearly, the phasing of our proposals will take into account the fiscal rules, the priorities that we have, and the situations that unfold and affect the economy going forward. I reiterate that we are very committed to fiscally prudent management of the economy. Indeed, the fiscal rules that have guided the debt reduction over the last over 10 years are a result of the work that we did when we were last in government and were legislated by us during that time. And those rules have guided the entire process of budgeting over the period since, and the surpluses that needed to be driven so that we could bring down the national debt to where it is now at a roughly 69% of GDP. But everyone, I think, accepts that having managed to grapple with the debt monster and tame it and bring it under control, we need to now pivot. We need to now move forward in a new way so that we can start to take the economy in a direction that can deliver for the Jamaican people and provide solutions to the deep problems that we face. And that is what our program is designed to do. So the question is, how is it to be funded? As you will see in the course of this press conference, we have come up with a series of ideas, some of which would be paid for out of the budget in each year going forward, some of which will be paid for by the agencies which have the responsibility for those particular items. And the totality of the budget cost of our proposals based on our estimates is $23 billion annually. And that would be assuming that everything was rolled out from day one. And that does not include the 11.4 billion, which the law has as ending, the extraction of 11.4 billion from NHT, which the law has ending at the end of this coming fiscal year. So the year ending March 2026 is by law currently the last year that these extraction of resources and your extraction of resources from NHT is allowed. So how will we pay for the $23 billion of expenditure that our programs aggregate to, and stopping the annual extraction of 11.4 billion from the NHT? First of all, as I've said, we have to comply with the fiscal rules, and the phasing and timing of the implementation of our proposals will be subject to compliance with those things. But it's very important to understand, first of all, that in this year's budget, which is roughly $1.27 trillion, there is $360 billion of what is described as discretionary expenditure. That is expenditure that is decided on by the political directorate based on their priorities, and is separate from interest payments, which are always have to be provided for in the budget by the Constitution, and also salaries of public sector workers. So that $360 billion represents the issues that this government has over time decided are important for the nation. Now, nobody would expect an incoming government of the PNP, having been voted in on a mandate to deliver the change that we are bringing to the society, to just follow the priorities of the government that would have been voted out to give us, to put us into office. So clearly, that $360 billion will be reconfigured, and we will go through it very carefully, line by line, to decide what programs we will keep, what programs we will scale down, what programs we might discontinue altogether, what programs we might defer, so as to create room for the $23 billion that we want to roll out of that $360 billion.
Now, folks, I need you particularly to pay close attention to this segment, the expenditure side, especially when Sister Fayval get down to what she called recurrent programs. These are programs that the government funds, and she will name them. And if you have to pause and write them down, please do, because it is from this fund that Mark Golding said at the conference that there is a $360 billion of what they called discretionary fund. In the budget, it comes under the heading of recurrent program, and the figure is $359,375 million. That's the actual figures, and he rounded it up to $360 billion. He gives the impression that each government coming in is obliged to, if they choose, to follow the program or change them. And so let me quote him. right? I will not summarize what he said. Let me quote him for you. I remind you of what he said. So clearly, that $360 billion will be reconfigured, and we will go through it very carefully, line by line, to decide what programs we will keep, what programs we will scale down, what programs we might discontinue altogether, what programs we might defer, so as to create room for the 23 billion that we want to roll out of that $360 billion. So there is no doubt about it. It is a $360 billion of what he called discretionary fund, which in the budget is under the heading of recurrent programs. Now I'm going to let Sister Fayval tell you some of what is in that recurrent program. And then you can then tell me where it is that Marky G expect to find the 34 billion. Which program is he going to scale down? Which one he's going to keep? Which one he's going to discontinue altogether? And which one he's going to defer? Listen now, make notes now, write it down. Now I need you to understand that what you'll hear Fayval reading out, the majority of those programs was not created by Honest himself. This is coming from way back, right? And each government, each successive government have taken on these programs, and you will see why. Plus, these programs you're going to hear is largely for the benefit of all of society, and there are some that are there specifically to benefit the poor, as well as those who are vulnerable in our society.
Madam Speaker, let's move on to the expense side of the ledger. So we are projecting that compensation of public sector workers, including pensions, wage negotiation, and items owed, will be $495,799,000,000. I don't believe the opposition would want to meddle with this number, except to increase it if they believe they can. So I will put that figure on their side of the ledger as well, because we have to pay public sector workers. We get to the next line item under the expenses, the recurrent programs. And for Jamaicans, recurrent programs are programs such as PATH, school feeding, Grand Store, 1009 schools, school transportation, books for schools, supplies for hospitals and health clinics, restorative justice programs, child diversion programs, Grand Gala and other independence celebrations, Know Your Numbers programs, trucking of water, subvention to our universities and teachers' colleges, subvention to NSWA for garbage collection, payment for streetlights, and so on. You get the gist of what is in this figure of $359.4 billion. And Madam Speaker, every dollar of it is already allocated to something.
So you heard the list of programs that this $359 billion is funding. And remember too what the government means by recurrent, that these are expenditures that the government has to finance every year. They have to spend on it every year. Because if every dollar is in the budget, then it must be in the budget because it is allocated for something. So what she's saying here is that there is not even 1 cent in this $375 million that is not allocated. It is allocated, and therefore, if you're going to take 34.4 billion out of it, it means you're going to have to cut something. So what are they going to cut? The street lights? Are they going to cut the garbage collection? Are they going to cut the subvention to schools or to hospitals? I remember the Englishman at the PNP's 86th annual conference telling us that they will be making the public hospitals and the public health care affordable, right? what them going to do, and then it's going to become affordable to us, which means them intend to bring back this user fee and just not telling you. So maybe that is where they're going to cut the subvention that is going to the hospitals. Maybe that is where they're going to cut some of the money. Are they going to cut it from the school feeding program? No, they said they're going to increase it. Where are they going to get the money from out of this recurrent program that the government is, well, for the most part, they're obliged to carry on. They're not obliged to carry on certain things, but they have to pick up the garbage, and them have to pay for the street lights, them have to pay JPS. So which one of these line items is the Englishman going to keep? Which one of these programs he's going to scale down? And which one of these Sister Fayval mentioned that he's going to discontinue altogether? You need to come out and tell us this, Marky G. Mr. Englishman, who in our parliament illegally. Come and prove to us that this is not just something you make up after the fact when you were called out and said, come with the numbers. You go look at the discretionary fund. You never look at it line by line before you came out and say what you say. So come and tell us, please. You need to come and tell us. Uno call Marky G for me. Matter of fact, nobody call him. Make him stay which part him there. Just send this to him, please. Because he needs to come and tell us which one of these line items and the others that Fayval did not mention that them intend to scale down, to cut, right? Or defer. You need to come and tell us to make room for the $34 billion program that you say go and grow economy. And we're going to look at that in our next video. So come and tell us, please, sir, where you're going to get your $34 billion out of this. You're talking about money that is not program money, not money that is taxes, projected money. You can have a recurrent expenditure, massa, and I talk about money that you think you might get. That not sound like you're a responsible person. You sound careless, because that is what careless people do. Go rent people place, don't know where the money coming from for the rent, but you tell the landlord say that you can't find the money to pay the rent because you expect some money will come in, and yet you now work from somebody who promised you, and then it may never come. So how you go pay the landlord in rent? What kind of foolishness that you're talking, master? Folks, let me leave it here because this video is long as it is, and I will come back with some more of that press conference that was held. So thank you all for joining me today, for sharing, liking, subscribing, and leaving your comments in the comments section. Until next time, take very good care of yourselves and walk good.